If you're looking to take your Spanish language abilities to the next level, join me at the Tacoma Language Academy, tacomalanguageacademy.com. There are online courses taught live via Zoom. You'll have a live instructor. It will be me. There are options for true beginners, a course called Spanish Story Lab. There are options for intermediate learners, a course called Spanish Chat Club. And there is an accelerator. It's called the Spanish Language Accelerator. And the next one is starting up this summer. I have limited spots available. So if you're interested in joining the Tacoma Language Academy, there is a free application at tacomalanguageacademy.com. tacomalanguageacademy.com. Free application. It's a one-pager just to make sure we're a good fit for each other. Indicate which course you're interested in, and we'll follow up with you when some courses become open or as they're upcoming, so you can plan ahead. All right, tacomalanguageacademy.com. Hola, 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 y bienvenidos a otro episodio de Listen, Read, Interact. Welcome to another episode of Listen, Read, Interact. This is episode number 76. My name is Andrew Snyder, and I'm the host of the Listen, Read, Interact podcast. Hey, you can follow along at listenreadinteract.com/76. That's a link to the show notes page. I think the show notes page are worth the price of admission, if you ask me. I think it's an outstanding product. At the show notes page, you're going to find a bunch of stuff, but I guess let me just first talk about myself for a moment. I am a Spanish language professor. I've taught at the college level, university level for 16, 17 years, something like that. A good amount of time I've been doing it. Probably a little bit longer. I taught some conversation classes way back in the day, so maybe even a little bit longer than that. But I've been teaching beginners. I've been teaching intermediate speakers for a long, long time. And I will tell you that I get a lot of people come into my classroom, even today, and they will tell me that they had 3 years of Spanish in high school but can't speak. Or they'll tell me things like, I can understand Spanish very well. Like when I listen, I can understand, or especially when I read, I can understand very well, but I can't speak it. And I would say that's a normal experience. So if you're experiencing that, you're in good company, because many people feel that way. They're unable to produce at a level they maybe feel like they should be able to produce. And I think what's going on there in many cases is that you are aware of the gap between your Spanish level abilities and your English level abilities, or whatever your native language happens to be. As an adult learner, even as a teenage learner, you're going to be able to notice the difference between your native language abilities and your second language abilities. You're just more aware of it. When you're a little kid and you don't say things exactly like a full-grown native speaker would say in your native language, nobody says anything to you. Nobody tries to correct you. In general, you might have an older sibling that tries to correct you, or, that's the case. Poor younger siblings get their older siblings to correct them all the time. I know my son corrects my daughter. And we're like, hey, you made the same mistake when you were that age. And the mistake is actually the wrong word. And that's something to consider. When you are learning a new language, you are actually not making mistakes when you say something that a native speaker wouldn't say. I've heard that termed as non-native utterances. That's a pretty fancy way of saying you say things sometimes a native speaker wouldn't say. That's part of the process. That's normal. And why is that normal? And why is that to be expected? And why is it not a mistake to say something a native speaker wouldn't say? The answer to that question is that we as learners, we as speakers, we as human beings have a mental representation of language, a mental model of language. I have before me a tiny elephant. It is made out of glass, and it's delicate, but I know it's an elephant because it has a tail, it's got 4 legs, it's got a big old brown behind, it's got tusks, it's got eyes in the right spot, it's got these big old floppy ears, it's got a trunk, it's shaped like an elephant, it looks like an elephant. It's not exactly an elephant, right? It's not exactly the thing, but it is a little model of an elephant. I know that it is an elephant. I have another tiny elephant that's on my desk. I happen to get tiny elephants. I collect them. Find this one. This one is gray. This one is made out of rubber. This one looks exactly like a little elephant. Now, they both are elephant-shaped. I can tell both are elephants, but the one that is gray and has all the detailed painting on it, and it's rubber, and it just looks like an elephant, is a much more detailed representation of what an elephant is. Obviously, it's miniature, it's not giant, it's not taking up my entire living room, it's not pooping on the floor, what have you. But it is an elephant nonetheless. But it's more detailed, and I can tell the difference between these two elephants. So when you're starting out learning Spanish, your mental model of Spanish will look more like this glass one here, perhaps. It'll kind of start to take shape, and it will look a little bit like an elephant. I can tell it's an elephant. I can tell you're speaking Spanish. But it's not going to look as detailed as this other one, this little rubber one here, which is obviously a more accurate representation of an elephant. And likewise, as you develop your internal language model, your Spanish model will look more like that of a native speaker's. And that happens with time. And I would say, if you're just starting out with the language, you might want to consider, 150 hours, 250 hours of really processing messages in Spanish before you kind of make an assessment of where you're at in the language and go, okay, if you've only done 50 hours of processing, meaning listening to Spanish and reading Spanish, that's the only way you get Spanish into your head, by the way, is to listen to Spanish and to read Spanish frequently and to process messages that are being communicated to you. Messages that you don't know ahead of time, your brain has to decipher those messages using only Spanish. And that's called processing. And so the more of that input processing that you can do, input is just the language you hear and read. If you do 150 hours, you're going to be in really good shape. You're going to have processed a lot of messages. You're going to be getting pretty good at Spanish. Conversely, if you've only processed 10 hours, your mental model is underdeveloped. It doesn't look anything like a native speaker's yet. It's got some elements, maybe you've memorized some chunk phrases, which is normal, but you've not gone through all the steps of acquisition. And so your mental model has not yet been developed to the point where you're going to be able to draw on it with any regular consistency. And so you're going to say things that a native speaker wouldn't say. That's not a mistake. That's simply the fact that your mental model is underdeveloped, and it requires more processing time for you to develop that mental model. So take your time, process and process and process. Listen to Spanish, read Spanish as much as you can. Furthermore, it's helpful to read and listen to Spanish that is at your level. If you're listening to Spanish that's a podcast, let's say you found some podcasts and just found one on your podcast player and you're listening and you don't understand anything, that's kind of not processing. That you're not processing messages. You're hearing stuff and your brain is saying, hey, that's garbled. That message doesn't mean anything. I can't figure that one out. Let's discard it. So that doesn't count as processing time. You need to have processing time with messages that you understand. Maybe not every word. And in fact, if you can get messages that are just a little bit beyond your level, better. Because that will pull you along a little bit. But you don't want to have every other word not being understood. Otherwise, you won't understand many messages. Now, maybe over time, you would start to understand more and more and more. But if you want to accelerate your learning, then if you want to accelerate your acquisition, which is the academic term that we should use, acquisition is different than conscious learning. But if you want to accelerate your acquisition, then you should have input, language that you hear and read, that is at your level and just a little bit beyond sometimes to pull you along. Even if it's you understand every word, that's not terrible because you're going to be processing these new messages. It's going to strengthen neural pathways. Your mental model is still going to refine itself. If there's occasionally a new word you haven't heard before, that's great too, because that new word you might figure out from context, or maybe you look it up and figure out what it means, but at some point you're going to acquire new vocabulary, and then the language that's quote-unquote in bounds for you will continue to be in bounds. Instead of continue to be in bounds, it will start to grow. You'll have more words that are in bounds. Got a little confused there. Yes, more words will be in bounds, and as more words become in bounds for you, the more interesting Spanish you can read, the more interesting Spanish you can listen to. So all of that to say, do lots and lots of listening, do lots and lots of reading. Hey, the name of the show is Listen, Read. Those are the first two ingredients to acquisition. The third ingredient is called Interact. Hey, the name of the show is how you pick up language. Listen, read, interact. Those are the ways that we pick up language. And the interaction piece, you might listen to it and interact. You might read to it and interact. Read language and interact. Interaction can be complicated. It can be simple. It might be answering yes or no questions. It might be as simple as ticking a box. You might not even have to say anything. You might not even have to do anything, but sit there and say, oh, I understood what that meant. Oh, okay, I got that. That might be enough in some circumstances to help you acquire language. Using the language, then trying to produce with your mental model also does stuff for you. It helps your subconscious, the mental model, helps your brain test those hypotheses about the language. And it says, hey, is that right or is that wrong? And you're not asking that question. Your brain is doing it for you at a subconscious level. And so listen, read, interact. That's the name of the show, and that's how you acquire language. Listen, read, interact. Hey, listenreadinteract.com/76 is the show notes page. Listen, Read, Interact is a language acquisition podcast, and so if you go to the show notes page, you're going to find lots of good stuff for you. Lots of good stuff. You're going to find a pre-reading and interaction section. So there's going to be some definitions. There's going to be a fill-in-the-blank quiz with those words from the definitions. There's going to be some example sentences, which are going to be the target on the podcast. So hear those on today's episode. There's going to be some order the words sentences where you can kind of put these words in order to form sentences and check your answers that way. And this is helping you to get to part 2. So if you can build through part 1, you understand those example sentences, check out that blue box for those example sentences, and you can actually see all the examples at once. You can click one at a time. You can click on the sentence and it will reveal the translations into English. So if there's words you don't get, you can figure out what those words are without having to go look stuff up. And if you can get through part 1, understand those example sentences, then you're ready for part 2. And part 2, you'll see, is a reading, and you'll hear that reading on today's episode. And you'll see that text with some footnotes to help you perhaps not have to go look up some likely unfamiliar words or phrases. And you'll see the whole text as you'll hear it. So you could listen to the text and read the text at the same time. Both of those are outstanding ways to process messages and to boost your comprehension. The more you understand, the more likely it is that your brain is going to incorporate that language into the mental model. There's some true or false questions there. There's some cause and effect. I've been liking those cause and effect ones. There's a survey. There's some order sentences. Now you're not ordering the words to make sentences. You're ordering sentences to make a story. And it's based on the short story that you read. And if you're good with part 3, then you're able to go on to... if you're good with part 2, then you're able to move on to part 3. And part 3 is the complete reading. And it's the same reading, except now instead of in the first person singular, it's now in the third person. So like instead of I go to the store, it's he goes to the store or she goes to the store. And there's more likely unfamiliar vocab. You can read the exact text that you'll hear on today's show. There's some multiple choice questions about comprehension. There's some complete the sentences. some personal questions that are short answer, and then a little reflection piece. And our goal is to get to that third part of the episode, the complete reading and interaction, and be able to not only read that text, listen to that text, and comprehend that text, but also interact with it in one or more or all of the ways that are available to you on the show notes page. This lesson it's really a self-contained lesson, probably could stretch over multiple days. So my recommendation to you would probably be do part 1 on one day, do part 2 on another day, and do part 3 on another day. And that's 3 days of language acquisition, language processing. Each day builds off the one before it. And I think that's a really good way to use this show. I think this show is a tool for you. It maybe isn't going to give you every single thing that you'll need to acquire language, because you really need to hear many voices, you need to read many authors, you need to really have a diverse set of inputs into the system. But 3 days a week, part 1, part 2, and part 3, you'll get some high quality, easy to understand Spanish in context, days that build off each other. The examples and pre-reading, the brief reading and interaction, and the complete reading and interaction, with our goal being to get to that part 3. Now, today's episode 76, you can follow along at, what's the name of the show? listenreadinteract.com/76. You can follow along there at the show notes page. There's a link also in the episode description. From there, this is part 1 of a 3-part story. And so, really, part 3 of today's episode is part 1 of a story. And next week, you'll hear part 2 of that story, and the following week, you'll hear part 3 of that story. And so there'll be a little saga. It goes from part 1 to part 2 to part 3, and each episode has part 1, part 2, part 3. So in total, there'll be 9 parts to this story that help you scaffold. Just like on the side of a building, you see people scaffold up and get higher and higher, and they build the scaffolding up around the building. Same thing that we'll do with this. You'll get higher and higher with your language abilities as you scaffold up the sides of the building. That makes a lot of sense. It's a good analogy. If you're a true beginner, I probably recommend you don't start with this episode and instead start with episode number 50. Or for your convenience, you can go to listenreadinteract.com/start, and that is a good place to start. Hey, it's called Start Here. It's a free course, no logins, nothing like that. listenreadinteract.com/start. Okay, with that, you'll hear some music, and we'll be all in Spanish for part 1. There'll be a bell transition sound to get into part 2, and we'll hear the short story there, the brief version of the short story, and we'll have a brief intermission, and then lastly, we'll finish up with the complete reading. All right, let's get on to the show. Ejemplos. Número 1. Mi amiga es rubia, pero su hermana es morena. Mi amiga es rubia, pero su hermana es morena. Mi amiga es rubia, pero su hermana es morena. 2. Las escaladoras suben la montaña con mucha calma. Las escaladoras suben la montaña con mucha calma. Las escaladoras suben la montaña con mucha calma. 3. A veces los atletas quieren desafiar sus propios límites. A veces los atletas quieren desafiar sus propios límites. A veces los atletas quieren desafiar sus propios límites. Cuatro. Mi papá sale de casa de madrugada para ir al aeropuerto. Mi papá sale de casa de madrugada para ir al aeropuerto. Mi papá sale de casa de madrugada para ir al aeropuerto. Cinco. El niño abrió los ojos bruscamente cuando sonó la alarma. El niño abrió los ojos bruscamente cuando sonó la alarma. El niño abrió los ojos bruscamente cuando sonó la alarma. 6. Después de dormir, siempre necesito frotarme los ojos. Después de dormir, siempre necesito frotarme los ojos. Después de dormir, siempre necesito frotarme los ojos. 7. Tú necesitas alistarte porque ya es muy tarde. 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 8. Nosotras somos escaladoras, pero no somos profesionales. Nosotras somos escaladoras, pero no somos profesionales. Lectura breve. Yo me llamo Victoria. Soy de la Argentina. Vivo en Buenos Aires, la capital del país. Tengo una mejor amiga. Se llama Ramona. Ramona y yo somos diferentes en algunas cosas. Yo soy rubia y Ramona es morena. Yo soy más alta que Ramona. Pero también somos similares. Ramona es tan fuerte y atlética como yo. Nosotras somos escaladoras. No somos profesionales, pero nos encanta practicar la escalada. Siempre buscamos lugares diferentes para desafiar a la muerte, o al menos a la gravedad. Un sábado de octubre, yo estaba en mi casa. Eran las 3 de la madrugada. Estaba lloviendo afuera y hacía frío. Pero en la casa todo estaba calentito. Yo estaba durmiendo cuando alguien llamó a la puerta. Me desperté bruscamente. Entonces me levanté y fui a la puerta para ver quién estaba llamando. Era Ramona. Tan pronto como abrí la puerta, Ramona entró en la casa. Amiga, dijo Ramona, hoy va a ser el día más divertido de nuestras vidas. ¿Por qué? Pregunté, frotándome los ojos. Tenía mucho sueño. ¿Por qué? Repitió Ramona. Porque hoy vamos a escalar el Cerro Torre. Ah, sí. ¿Eso era hoy? Pregunté. Tenía muchas ganas de volver a la cama. Sí, y yo tengo muchas ganas de salir. Anda, alistate, y yo preparo el desayuno. Así que me vestí, y Ramona preparó un gran desayuno. A eso de las 4:30 de la madrugada, salimos apresuradas para el aeropuerto de Buenos Aires. All right, a brief intermission and we'll be right back to the show. Listen, Read, Interact is a value for value podcast. So what that means is I'm going to give you the show up front. No paywalls, no advertising, because advertising sucks. And we get too much of that in our lives as it is. So value for value just means that if you're finding value in the show, help support the show in some way. There's lots of ways you could help. Share the show with other people, let people know about it. Put a link to Listen, Read, Interact on your social media, whatever you do. I don't get on social media, so I don't do that. But if you would do it, if you're on it and share it, that would be a huge help, and that provides a lot of value back to the show, getting more eyeballs and more earballs, as it were, onto the podcast. There are other ways you can contribute to the show. You could, for example, ask a question about language acquisition. How does that thing work? How does that process work? What are some tips and tricks, etc.? And you can do that. You can email me at andrew@readtospeak.com. andrew@readtospeak.com, all one word, andrew@readtospeak.com. You can also help the show with a monetary donation, and those do help out tremendously. There's a lot of work that goes into every single episode. It's not just the recording of them, it's the thinking of the stories, it's the highlighting of vocabulary, it's making the show notes pages interactive and building on these things. If you go back to the earlier episodes, you'll see like the first couple that I put out, the audio quality was not as good. It's gotten better over time. The show notes pages have gotten more dynamic and more useful, more kinds of activities, more kinds of ways of interacting. And so there's a lot of work that goes in behind the scenes, and all I ask in return for this fantastic product and this outstanding product, especially those show notes pages, I'm very proud of those, is that you provide some value back. And you can do that with a monetary donation. That's so helpful. It helps keep things going. That's really the only way that this show can keep going, is with your support. We're kind of like NPR in that way, except hopefully not boring. And so, sorry, NPR, you're boring. It is what it is. But your monetary support does make all the difference. And those NPR stations have the right idea in terms of having listener support, because the people that support the NPR programming love the NPR. You know, they love their public radio. And if you love Listen, Read, Interact, and you want it to keep going, I need your support. And you can make a monetary donation of any amount, any frequency, at listenreadinteract.com/donate. 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 I'll say it one more time. Any amount, any frequency is good. If you are donating $50 and above, I will read your name, location, and amount on the show as a way of saying thank you. I'll also read a short note from you if you've got one for me. I know those PayPal donations let you write a little note on there if you've got something to say. And you can add a little note there in that PayPal, or you can email me, andrew@readtospeak.com. And I'll be sure to read your note on the next episode. So that is the deal. Your support makes all the difference in the world. Any amount, any frequency, those $4 weekly sustaining donations really do make a lot of difference as well. They help us out when times are slow. You know, the cost of hosting this is not free and all of that. And as the show grows, the costs of hosting go up. And so your support is the only way that this thing can keep going. Thank you to everyone who has donated in the past. I really, really appreciate each and every one of you. And again, your support really does allow this show to function. And without you, it will cease to function at a certain point. So, hey, thank you so much for your donations and for considering donating and supporting us. listenreadinteract.com/donate. Let's go on to the final reading of the show. And I'm going to put a little bell sound here so that as you're going through your podcast player, you'll be able to see where the next bell is. Lectura completa. Victoria y Ramona eran mejores amigas. Eran de la Argentina. Vivían en Buenos Aires, la capital del país. Ellas tenían algunas diferencias. Por ejemplo, Victoria era rubia y Ramona era morena. De la misma manera, Victoria era más alta que Ramona. Pero las amigas eran similares también. Ramona era tan fuerte y atlética como Victoria. Las amigas eran escaladoras. No eran profesionales, pero les encantaba practicar la escalada. Siempre buscaban lugares diferentes para desafiar a la muerte, o al menos a la gravedad. Un sábado de octubre, Victoria estaba en su casa. Eran las 3 de la madrugada. Estaba lloviendo afuera y hacía frío, pero estaba calentito en la casa. Victoria estaba durmiendo cuando alguien llamó a la puerta. La joven se despertó bruscamente. Entonces se levantó y fue a la puerta a ver quién estaba llamando, o como se dice en Argentina, llamando. Era Ramona. Tan pronto como Victoria abrió la puerta, ella entró en la casa. Amiga, dijo Ramona, hoy va a ser el día más divertido de nuestras vidas. ¿Por qué? Preguntó Victoria, frotándose los ojos. Era obvio que tenía mucho sueño. ¿Por qué? Repitió Ramona. Porque hoy vamos a escalar el Cerro Torre. Ah, sí. ¿Eso era hoy? Preguntó Victoria, que tenía muchas ganas de volver a la cama. Sí, y yo tengo muchas ganas de salir. Anda, alístate, y yo te preparo el desayuno. Así que Victoria se vistió y Ramona preparó un gran desayuno. A eso de las 4:30 de la madrugada, las amigas salieron apresuradas para el aeropuerto de Buenos Aires. Okay, muy bien, excelente, buen trabajo, eh? If you made it this far, you understood everything, you did a wonderful job, a fantastic job. I need to stop saying wonderful, trying really hard. You did an amazing job. Ooh, that's just as bad as wonderful. You did a stupendous job. Estupendo, no? Estupendo. Well, thank you very much for listening to Listen, Read, Interact this week. Hopefully you got some good value out of today's show. Next week, we have part 2 of the same story. So we've just got a little bit, so tune in next Saturday, and you'll hear part 2 of this 3-parter. It's good to break up longer narrations into shorter, digestible chunks, and that's the idea with breaking these up into shorter chunks. So listenreadinteract.com/76 for today's episode, and listenreadinteract.com/donate to help support the show. Thank you so much for listening. Muchísimas gracias y hasta la próxima.